Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us and welcome to Ad Age Remotely. I'm Janine Poggi, Senior Editor here at Ad Age, and today I am joined live by Whitney Headen, co-founder and CEO of the agency 19th and Park, and one of Ad Age's 2020 Women to Watch honorees. Hi, Whitney. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Janine. Thanks for having me.
So before we get started, for those of you watching at home, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them on our social channels and we will try to get to them during our conversation. So this week here at Ad Age, we revealed our class of 2020 Women to Watch honorees, showcasing female executives who have been pioneers in the ad world. As co-founder and CEO of 19th and Park, one of the first Black women-owned and operated agencies, Headen has been and her team have looked to level the playing field for women and minorities by leveling access. Whitney, can you talk about how you and your team have approached thinking about diversity and inclusion in every aspect of the business?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that we have approached diversity and inclusion is we don't think about diversity and inclusion in that same retrospect. It's not about how diverse can we make our teams. It's really about making sure we have the right people in the right positions and providing opportunities. We've had so many people come through our doors that have, possessed the skill set, possessed the know-how, but just haven't received the opportunities. So that's one way. And then for us, like we do advertising and creative campaigns. So a large part of our business is really focused on making sure that we are directly speaking to consumer sex and making sure that they are heard across multiple different genres, diversities, ages, ethnicities. So approaching diversity and making sure that we always have an expert at the table is something that's really important to us, and also allows us to apply to very large audience sectors. I think once you admit that, everybody can't be an expert at everything, and even if we're still operating from behind the scenes, whether it's as simple as a lighting or script writer, that you really need to understand what the end goal is through the entire project. And that's one of the ways that we definitely focus on leveling the playing field and focusing on diversity.
Amid COVID-19, amid conversations around racial injustice, what have brands and clients been coming to you and the agency for? What kind of questions are they asking? What are they looking to do at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like honestly, first quarter of 2020 has been an entire decade. Those are two completely separate conversations that we've been having, but all at once and combined. So if we're talking about COVID, like a lot of clients were coming to us for innovation. We've always prided ourselves on being digital first, having that background and being able to connect on different sectors and different opportunities of integration. So that has always been one of the things with COVID of like, how do we pivot? If we had these production dollars, these event dollars, whatever already allocated in our budgets, how do we pivot and how do we reach these audience sectors in a way that is efficient and is comparable to what we were going to do previously? And for us, I think that's a conversation that we were excited to have. It's ways that we've been pushing our clients to think differently for a long time. I was having a conversation last week with one of a potential client, and I was talking about my own personal background of how I've been on the cusp of every large shift in the agencies, whether that was in broadcast with the introduction of digital or from radio, from publishing and everything across the gamut. And one thing that I think people always regret is that they moved a little too late. Yeah. So I think with COVID, it's really getting into the mindset that this is a new normal. This is not something that is temporary and set for this specific time of the world. Like this is something that we're going to have to adapt to. And it's almost about time. Like right. Why, if we have access to all of these consumer sectors, if we have, social media and all of these abilities to connect with people at mass, why are we not capitalizing on it better? I think advertisers have really struggled to utilize the resources in front of them, one from fear and two from this lack of knowledge. And COVID has kind of pushed them to have to just remove the safety net, like not think about it so much and really just do it and try new things. And that's definitely where we've been as far as a COVID landscape is. And it's been really fun. It's been a learning experience for us as well, getting creative with our creativity and seeing how deeply we can push it without having to sacrifice on quality, time, or professionalism.
Right.
From a racial injustice standpoint, I mean, it's been interesting to work with clients as they're trying to figure out where they stand. And I think one of the hardest things about coming from a corporation is a corporation is a mass entity, right? So you as an individual are speaking at the helm of, you know, thousands of people, trying to understand how to construct one simple message that's going to reach the masses and not offend others. Or not make others feel left out. That's really hard for consumer brands to do. And it's something that, if we're going back to our conversation about diversity and inclusion, it's something that should have been a part of the conversation for a long time, so that people aren't feeling so blindsided that now integrating race and gender and uncomfortable conversations is coming at them so deeply and so strongly, like it's just one after the other. And one of the things that we've definitely been working with our clients around is honesty. It's okay to say that you didn't know. It's okay to say that you should have done better. It's okay to directly approach the problem head on and think about it as a long-term strategy. And I think if we're going back to what we were just talking about utilizing your audience and your consumers, advertising has changed. It's a two-way conversation. You have to integrate the consumer or you will lose them. So really integrating your customer and your consumer set into the conversation to make sure that they understand where you're coming from and what your goals are, and that getting away from the conversation around diversity and really getting into what inclusion looks like.
And, you know, one of the things that, speaking to your point about, you know, brands kind of unsure of what to do, you know, one of the things that we've heard a lot is there's, you know, fear amongst company leaders that anything they do may be met with criticism. You know, how do you respond to that?
I mean, yeah. It's hard. Like that's part of being human, right? It's part of, you know, actually making a stand towards something. It's part of not being complicit. Like there are going to be things that potentially are going to change the way an audience perceives you. But I think if you're able to approach it with authenticity and still open the dialogue, because if you look at a lot of the issues that people are having with advertisers and their missions is that they're not really saying anything.
Yeah.
They're trying to be so safe that they're completely missing the mark of how to service this audience. I think it's really about, there's a few advertisers that have done a great job of showcasing what they plan on doing internally, externally, and making it a long-term goal. This isn't something that's going to change overnight. This is something that's been a problem and an issue that's happened for quite some time. Right. So how do we really approach it in a way that people feel safe? They don't feel like it's a marketing gimmick. And that's difficult too, because we're looking at it as though this is a campaign. This is not a campaign. We're trying to actually diversify an entire industry, an entire world, and make sure that everybody is seen and heard. And, you know, it's very difficult in the fact that people are constantly moving. The world's moving faster with the introduction of social media, with the introduction of digital, with the introduction of the internet. And brands have to be okay with taking some risk and looking at the cost analysis of what it really looks like and making sure that they're seen and heard across all genres. We didn't have this level of access before. When it was broadcast only or when it was radio, you were really only speaking to a very like marginalized audience. But now everybody has their opportunity to have a voice, have an opinion, and be directly related to what you're doing as a brand.
Absolutely. So just want to say hi to some of those watching from home. We have Roberto Aguirre, Gary Kochi, Anna Pham, Ala Adam, Nashoni Whitlock, Nicholas Postema, and Kelly Chun. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am Janine Poggi, Senior Editor here at Ad Age, and I am joined by Whitney Headen, who is the co-founder and CEO of 19th and park. So another thing I want to get to is, we've talked about the need to level access. And during our conversations, you mentioned that you're from Virginia, and there weren't as many opportunities for you to do what you wanted to do. So you drove across country to figure that out and do that. Obviously, not everyone can do that. Not everyone wants to do that. So how then does the industry need to help level the playing field?
Yeah, I think so. When I graduated, it was during the last recession that we went through. So in 2008, and it was a different world. Internet, social media. I think the only social platform at that time was Facebook and Twitter, and they were used very differently than they are used today. So I think in some ways, brands and companies have leveled the playing field of just allowing people to see kind of behind the hood of like what it looks like to work at places, what these job opportunities are. I do think understanding a little bit more about what their college relations are and how are they doing recruitment. And I say that because recruitment has changed. The audience has changed. How you're going to find qualified employees has changed. The state of the traditional resume, I think a lot of that is just outdated. Like, how are you really sourcing to find talent? And how are you giving talent opportunities to find you? And whatever that looks like, whether it's open source conversations, giving public access to live events. I think if we're going back again to COVID has really opened the door to a lot of access and conversations. Conferences that once were thousands of dollars are now free on the internet or for a very lower nominal price, where people that before weren't able to go and see those different opportunities are now allowed to. And even outside of like a cost restriction, which is a whole nother story, it's even just opening up from a time perspective. Now these things are available online. They're available to come see at your leisure. Even the conversation we're having right now.
Right.
That wasn't something that we were doing before to really make people understand what's available. I feel like from a company standpoint and a college recruitment standpoint, it really matters of what we're showing people what these jobs are. Go ahead.
You mentioned the idea of the resume too, and you have some interesting ideas around how companies should hire for jobs. Can you actually talk a little bit about, brands thinking beyond traditional resume requirements?
Yeah, I think if we're going through the full HR practice, right? So the introduction of resumes, higher education degrees, even down to like training and unconscious bias, things like that we're using to fill out diversity, to fill out who people are, assessments. I think all of those need to just completely be upended. And because of that, a resume can mean anything. You can say whatever you want on a resume. You can adjust your experience. These jobs, especially if we're talking about marketing and advertising, are skill set driven. Yeah. You really have to know how a person thinks, how a person feels, how they are able to interpret information. When you're going into training, you have to understand how these opportunities are really shaping the way a person is able to dissect and then project that into their everyday practices. That's not going to be done in just a standardized test. You're not going to be able to test aptitude and strategic thinking and emotional intelligence through those opportunities. You really have to dig a little bit deeper into understanding who a person is and how they're going to get to the end goal. I think adding in what's missing to me personally between that college standpoint and a first and second job is whatever that training is in the middle to really prepare people for the workforce, to make them understand what the opportunities are, what is corporate culture, what can they do and what can't they do, how are we creating pathways, that type of advisement and mentorship within companies. Some of them are doing it well and some of them do it just a little bit. Is what's missing, and really being able to foster a community. And I think we get a lot of conversations about the new generation from Gen Z and millennials. I mean, millennials, we're not new anymore. We're kind of old now. But the conversation's always about, we hop jobs, we don't stay any places. But the reality of it is, why aren't companies looking into why? The retention rate and that loss of income to a company hurts. If you have, high turnovers, you're not able to keep people into the job. So we really need to look at why they're not staying at jobs. What are the companies not offering them that they feel like they can get other places? And how do we push them to make sure that we're fostering development and fostering it in a way that's intergenerational? We're in a standpoint now where there's 5 generations in the workplace. That's crazy.
Yeah.
To try to make all of them understand each other, understand the tools, understand the workforce, understand everything. That's a really difficult place to be in. And I think companies need to acknowledge that a little bit deeper and figure out what their overarching strategies are going to be to combat these things so that we don't have another grand revolution that forces them to.
How are you at 19th and Park accounting for emotional intelligence in hiring? Like, what steps are you taking beyond like the traditional resume to account for that?
Yeah. So one of the main things that we do, and we're still a niche team, but we do a lot of community thinking. We always do projects. We do group interviews. We do accept resumes, but resumes more so for seniority to understand like how long they've been in the job force. We have testing, so EQ, even like emotional intelligence tests that we like to do, or even personality. And it's conversational as well. So making sure that we're fostering a community that really does focus on mental and personal health and wellness. I mean, that was something that it took time for us to acknowledge that was a thing. And that came from having like two-way conversations with our employees and even seeing like what we ourselves needed. On an everyday basis, I think COVID really opened our eyes to some of the things that we wanted to prioritize in our organization. Especially being a production-driven, a marketing-driven industry, because as you know, in our industry, like you're praised for how hard and how long you can work. So making sure that those types of opportunities are given to our employees, and then also making sure that we're fostering their pathways. And when I say fostering their pathways, we have a pretty flat organization. Yes, people have titles. Yes, people have expertise, but we make sure that everybody has an integrated approach. Everybody knows what the other people are doing. They have the opportunity to learn, and that we're always fostering new ways to develop talent. I think if anything, that is my core purpose in and outside of 19th from a personal standpoint, is just to make sure that we're fostering and developing talent and making sure that there's places that they can go and that they're able to push it to a different level of limits.
Right. I want to get to that in a minute, but we have a question from Michael on YouTube. What do you make of the idea that the way some ad firms target specific demographics further incentivizes segregation?
Yeah, I think that it's interesting, right? So I've worked across every genre, from general market to multicultural. I think cultural marketing is important. I think being able to have the same conversation with different types of people is important, but it's in the way that it's done. I think what further segregation is the fact that other audience sectors, not related to how much they're actually spending in a sector, how large their sector is growing, will receive 3/4 of what the budget is for a general market audience. And the general market audience will be targeted to one subsector of a community. So how a lot of advertisers look at general market, it's like, this is for everybody, but it can't be for everybody if you only represent a certain type of person, age, gender, race, demo. So I think having cultural marketing and being able to segment budgets in a way that you're able to speak to different people, it really does help. It helps your marketing solutions. It helps your ROI. America itself is a melting pot. That's what we pride ourselves on. So only directing marketing to certain demographics is a failed effort, in my opinion.
I'm Janine Poggi, Senior Editor here at Ad Age, and I'm joined by Whitney Headen, who is the co-founder and CEO of 19th and Park. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them on our social channels. So I want to get back to the comment that you made before about mentorship and training. You helped found the Learning Currency. Can you talk about that and what the program is looking to achieve?
Yeah, definitely. The program's called the Life Currency. And it's really focused on that in-between time that I was talking about between college and first or second jobs. How are we fostering community? How are we focusing on empowerment? How are we focusing on growing emotional intelligence and confidence? What are some of the insides and outs between those sectors? It really started from myself being a mentor and focusing on different, I served over, I'd say over 100 girls between my time in college to now. And as I grew in my career and I grew in what I needed to do, it just became inundated with the same types of questions. But I was realizing that the questions were the same. You know, people wanted to know, how do they get access? How do you get in? It all seems like it's one big secret to enter an industry and succeed and get into some of these jobs in specific industries. So I took my knowledge in digital marketing and production, and I created a content mentorship platform. And what we focus on there is really using video content editorial to help mentor people through those early years of their 20s, whether that is in life skill development and helping understand financials, or even decoding a paycheck, how to understand student loans, to getting a job interview. And we have a membership platform that focuses on community interaction. So like peer-to-peer mentorship. So if you are, just like I was talking about for me in Virginia, if I'm in Virginia trying to figure out how I can move to New York or LA, or even get access to an internship or opportunity someplace that's so different than from where I am, you can go and reach somebody that's going through that same place that you are, in your same age bracket, in a different community or a different area. So that's really the focus of the life currency. And then we also do like intergenerational training. We work a lot with like businesses to make sure that their infrastructures are set up properly to bring in this next force of the workforce, and like how can they create different internal programming for this incoming class of Gen Z and, you know, young millennials that are in their workforce. And so our plans for that is just really to scale. We work a lot directly with colleges. We do a lot of experiential learning tactics. We're coming out with a set of programs and products, more so that focus on experiential learning and how people develop differently, with like video games and stuff like that, that really is going to target the new generation and how they consume information, how they're able to dissect it, and how we can help develop this next workforce, especially with, you know, our new normal that I think sped up due to COVID. What does that look like? And how can corporations prepare?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, you know, what does mentorship, what does training look like amid COVID-19? You know, assuming that many people will remain working remotely for a time being, even as things slowly start to open up, the face-to-face interactions will certainly change. You know, how are you looking of evolving mentorship and training in this time?
Yeah, honestly, with the life currency, we kind of have already evolved it, because it was solely set up for the fact that I personally couldn't be a million places at once. And it's set up in a way that people can take in information and learn on their own, but also reach out to people in their same peer group with similar ideals, similar skill sets, similar opportunities, and have those two-way conversations. Mentorship and development in this new digital age really evolves around conversation, communication. Communication is key. I think we're going to move into a place where we're constantly having to over communicate our needs, which is something that I think is good, because somewhere down the line in the past, 5 or 6 years, we started to under communicate. We started to under communicate with social media and email and every different shortcutted way to get a point across, even if we're going into acronyms and emojis. And so now we're forced to pick up the phone. We're forced to utilize the technology that's been available to us for I don't know how long, but we just never accessed it, almost for our own fears or insecurities or whatever it looks like. But now we're really forced to have those conversations. It's something that we talked about in my Women to Watch interview. It's leveled the playing field in a way that everybody now has the same opportunity to win towards the same levels of business. And I say that from a way of like, if we go back to the Mad Men age, and even like right now, of where, you know, relationships are really fostered by opportunities. And if you are able to, you know, take somebody to a courtside game or a $500 dinner, which, you know, are all great efforts of gratitude, that were really staples in our industry, in the advertising industry. And I think what has changed now that we're all in the home and we're all working from the same internet connections and kids running around and everything, it's just normalized everybody and it's put us on a level playing field where we can really focus on solutions. We can really focus on skill set. And I hope that's something that transcends way past COVID. Once everything opens back up again, I hope we're really just really focusing on like, who are the best people to go after the jobs? What's the best thing to happen to develop jobs? And how are we as companies being able to foster those communities even deeper?
And circling back before we end, you know, to the conversation we were having about how brands are talking about, you know, trying to, you know, help move beyond racial injustice. What actions do you hope to see from the ad world moving forward?
Pure accountability and visibility. I think we're in a place where you kind of have to remove the velvet rope. Like, you have to show people what you're actually doing behind the scenes. I hope we see more integration of women and Black people and people of color in general in leadership positions. I hope we are actually measuring the results and the trajectory of what these inclusions look like for companies, whether that's from a revenue standpoint, from a retention standpoint, or even from just a brand affinity standpoint. I hope to see more diversity in and behind the scenes of what brands are doing, whether that's from a production crew standpoint or who you're actually putting behind making the creative for you and who's having the seats at the table. I hope to see a lot more vulnerability, a lot more people saying, you know what, I don't know, or I'm not an expert on this, or I need to see how we can integrate that into what we're doing. I hope to see that this is not a marketing campaign for brands. This is not something that's going away. Black people are not going away. We've been here for quite some time. And to make sure that we're really focused on how do we best serve the communities that we're looking towards. And I also will say this, that it's not a one size fits all opportunity. You know, everybody's extremely multifaceted. People don't want to just focus on the one thing that directly shows themselves, if that makes sense. Like, Black people don't only do Black things. So making sure that we are really developing our marketing campaigns and our internal infrastructures in a true standpoint of inclusion.
Great. Thank you so much, Whitney, for joining us today. I appreciate you being on.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for having me.
And you can read about all of Ad Age's Women to Watch at adage.com. And check back for in the fall, where we will be hosting an event to celebrate this year's honorees. As always, thank you to our Ad Age crew, Alfred Mascaroni, Anna Sakula, Max Sternlicht, and Elise Liffring for making this live stream happen. And thanks for everyone for tuning in.
Bye. Thank you.